תודה רבה. I now call upon Emily, ILTV. Let's understand what that's all about. ILTV.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying with us until the end. I know there's still a lot of really great speakers to hear from before we close this important conference. But I want to speak to you a little bit today about the role of media in reporting, in particular after October 7th. It's not easy to speak truth in a world where they're weaponizing the lies that we're seeing about Israel. It's not easy to speak about justice in a time when journalism itself has been hijacked by propaganda. And it's certainly not easy to speak about Israel, our people, our pain, our right to survive in a media and social media landscape that too often acts not as a watchdog of power, as the media's role should be, but as a mouthpiece for terrorism. But precisely because the truth is more needed than ever, we as journalists do it anyway, because the truth does still matter. And at ILTV, we've made it our mission to tell Israel's story to the world because too many others won't. Because, in fact, they've abandoned their journalistic responsibility entirely. Since October 7th, the world has been flooded with misinformation, disinformation, deliberate campaigns of deception meant to obscure the horrors of what Hamas did while vilifying Israel for the very crime of existing. One of the most striking examples is, of course, the Al-Ahli hospital bombing. Within hours, nearly every major outlet, from the New York Times to The Guardian to Reuters, ran with the Hamas-supplied claim that Israel had attacked a hospital and killed 500 civilians. No verification, no evidence, just narrative. Only days later, it was confirmed that the explosion was actually caused by an errant Islamic Jihad rocket intended to be fired at the state of Israel. And in fact, 500 hadn't died, between 40 to 50 had died when it hit the parking lot of a hospital. But the blood libel had already spread globally. These narratives, they weren't just born on the battlefield. They were seeded and nurtured by powerful actors, state-run propaganda from the Islamic regime in Iran and Qatar. They're filtered through platforms like the Qatari state-run media, Al Jazeera, and spread like wildfire through social media. What we're witnessing is not just a war on Israel, it's a war on the truth itself. Too much of the international press has echoed Hamas talking points word for word, repeating unverified casualty statistics from Hamas's health ministry, using loaded terms like genocide with no evidence, while barely mentioning the fact that we still have 58 hostages in Hamas hands. This isn't journalism. It's a perversion of everything that journalism is supposed to stand for. At ILTV, we're choosing another path. When the world was saturated with anti-Israel bias, we chose to tell the truth clearly, consistently, and without apology. We were among the first English-language media outlets permitted to enter Gaza with the IDF. We were at the scene of the horrific October 7th attacks, reporting on the truth, telling the stories of victims on the ground before the day was even over. Our team has been on the ground under rocket fire in the Golan Heights, in Judea and Samaria, and throughout the country as the IDF carries out critical counter-terror operations. While the international media fails to provide context to the complexities of what's happening in Israel, we report the full picture to audiences of millions in times of joy, such as broadcasting the return of our hostages, and in times of sorrow. As a result, we've seen something extraordinary. Our YouTube monthly views skyrocketed 879% since 2023 to 6.3 million. It proves just how desperately accurate, clear English language reporting is needed. On social media, we now reach millions of views every month. Our content is broadcast across 11 channels, and we're soon to be launching a 24/7 channel with regular updates about what's happening on the ground in Israel. But it's not just the numbers, it's the impact. We've brought in some of the biggest names in journalism, military, diplomacy, and human rights, not for sound bites, but to explain the truth about Hamas, about the Islamic regime in Iran, and about Qatar, and most importantly, why this fight matters to everyone. Because Israel's fight is your fight too in the United States and in Europe. We've been so effective, so clear, and so consistent on exposing, for example, the Islamic regime in Iran, that ILTV itself has been targeted at times because, in cyber attacks, because of our activity. And that's because when truth is spoken loudly enough, it becomes a threat to tyranny, and that's what journalism, or good journalism, should do. But let me be absolutely clear. This battle isn't confined to the Middle East. It's a byproduct of the disinformation war. What we now see erupting in our universities, our communities, our streets. It's manufactured outrage over Israel's right to self-defense that has led to real-world violence. Jewish students barricaded inside Columbia University's library while anti-Semitic mobs chant for Intifada revolution. Synagogues firebombed in Sydney, Australia, defaced in Montreal, Toronto, and Los Angeles. At UCLA, students wearing IDF shirts were dragged by their hair and beaten while campus police stood down. At Cooper Union here in New York, Jewish students had locked themselves in a library while pro-Hamas rioters banged on the glass outside. And in Germany and other European countries, we've seen Holocaust memorials repeatedly defaced. This is not spontaneous grassroots activism. It is the product of a media ecosystem empowered and poisoned by lies, where the aggressor is framed as the victim, and the victim is blamed for fighting back. And I want to speak just for a moment on something very personal, because the toll that this war has taken on journalists on the ground has been very, very high and very painful as an Israeli. For me, the moment that broke me wasn't even when a missile landed on my block in Tel Aviv, leveling an entire building. It was when I was anchoring live, with horror, the twisted hostage release ceremony of Eli Sharabi, when Hamas forced him to stand on stage and say that he was looking forward to seeing his wife and daughters upon returning to Israel, when we already knew that Hamas had murdered his wife and daughters on October 7th. That moment was pure psychological torture. I remember crying for most of the day, despite the joy that we felt at seeing the return of some of our hostages come home, because the world and the media didn't seem to care about how savage the cruelty of Hamas was. They didn't care about the depravity. They didn't even care about the basic humanity of a man knowingly speaking about reuniting with his family that had already been murdered. No one involved, not even the Red Cross, had the moral courage to say, we won't participate in this. At ILTV, we refused to air, like most of the Israeli media, the forced speeches of these tortured hostages. But much of the international media and social media platforms stayed completely silent after these events. That was the day that I really lost faith in the international press. But that doesn't mean that we walk away. It means that we step up. Because if we don't tell the truth, no one will. That's why when the media framed this entire conflict as Israel versus the Palestinian people, with headlines from CNN, BBC, even the AP, we brought in legal experts, military analysts, and humanitarian voices to show how Israel is targeting terrorists in Gaza, not civilians. We published footage of leaflets dropped, warning issues, humanitarian aid trucks that were being coordinated, all while Hamas is using its own people as human shields. When the media accused Israel of blocking that humanitarian aid, we showed the truth that Israel was facilitating daily deliveries of humanitarian aid. When media outlets platformed October 7th deniers, we stood tall and we told the truth about what was happening on the ground. And when this war was presented, most importantly, as Israel's war alone, what we still see today in much of the media, we reminded the world this isn't a war about land, it's about civilization. The Islamic regime in Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Islamic Jihad, they are seeking to dismantle Western civilization. Their drones, their missiles, their bombs, they may not have reached Paris or New York yet, but their propaganda certainly has. Their cyber attacks, subversion, and political influence are already here. As Churchill once warned of the Nazi threat before it crossed the channel, the storm is coming, but the deluge has already begun. So too now the physical bombs may not be falling on Europe or on the United States, and I hope they never do. But the moral collapse is underway, and October 7th was just the beginning. At ILTV, we're not just fighting for truth, we're fighting for the world's memory before it's erased. We don't just report the news, we're defending it. Thank you very much.